We have 50 minutes left, and I want to hear 50 people speak, including our speakers up here. I'll go to the mics in a moment, but I want to share one emotion with you. Well, a couple of emotions. I do feel empowered when I come to Globe always. But then sometime when I'm on the plane or back in my office, I get two other emotions. One is anger, and the other is sadness. I feel anger that I'm not doing enough to get to where we need to go, and sadness that we're not moving there fast enough. But you can channel that in different ways. And I'm asking you and inviting you right now to channel that passionately. Yes, there are strictures that you have to operate with. I'm an unabashed believer in business and enterprise, and I believe we can have a major role in building the green economy, in fact, a critical role that we need to build. But we'd like to know now, and I turn it to you, there are mics out there, what is your passion that you want to try to do differently? And don't speak to the panel, speak to the 600 people in this audience, because it is a town hall. And if you are speaking to the panel, and panelists, I'd like one or two panelists to comment. I don't want someone to say, I would like the whole panel to comment. No, it's a town hall. So our mics are open, and I'm just going to stay completely quiet, and the first person goes there.
Hi, my name is Bela Lazarus. I'm an editor at Business in Vancouver. I edit the sustainability section. I edit our Green Space magazine. I also edit Green Space Alberta, so those are sort of our business publications. I also edit a consumer magazine called Home Makeover, and I deal with sustainability issues there. My passion is getting green sexy for the consumer magazine and for the consumers. What I'm finding is, in our B2B magazines, people are really ready to talk about great changes. Industry has clean tech, lots of amazing things happening, but at the consumer level, it's the same stuff over and over again. So I have a couple of questions. One is, do you find that it's really industry and government that's going to be making the biggest changes when it comes to reduction of greenhouse gases? And number two is there an area we haven't tapped into for consumers that deals with perhaps not the greening of the environment, but the greening of health? In other words, looking at sustainability from a health issue that will make consumers go on to the next level beyond just turning lights off and putting in dual flush toilets.
Great question. Dan, thoughts on that?
Oh, a lot of them.
Go for it, girl.
I guess to respond to what you said, and it's almost like a perfect commercial for Epic, which is coming up. And I do think one of the things that's powerful about a convening like Epic, which is the 28th through the 30th of May, here in Vancouver, and also sponsored by Globe, is it's very seriously, there is that gap. You know, I mean, we're sitting here in this room, and I can't resist the commercial. This is Interface carpet. We also have a residential product. But it's, how do you get consumers to not think that, oh, okay, I've got the perfect example. I remember in 1980 something, or in the early 80s, this lovely lady who was in her 70s at the time, we were talking, and I've always been doing green stuff, so she said, well, Diane, I'd love to use it, but it's just so brown and it's so ugly. You know, if they would just bleach it white, she was talking about paper, and you realize that there's this gap, and there's a lag still in the mentality of the public. So part of it is the responsibility of producers to produce products that are ecologically sound, but are also in a way that you don't have to say, oh, I'm going to pick the green option. I'm just going to pick the best product. And the greenness of it is baked or built into the process. The last little point, what you have said about the health component is so critical, and it's near and dear to my heart. Somewhere in the early part of the last century, we separated out environment for health. As it happens, my grandfather first started practicing medicine in 1917. I never really got to know him, but as a kid reading his notebooks, he talked about in Dallas, Texas, a school, C.F. Carr, that was next door to a lead smelter. Those kids spent 9 months of the year, 8 hours plus a day, in a setting with no buffer between their school, the playground, and this lead smelter. And he tracked the pulmonary diseases that those children had. We have got to bring a different mindset to how important it is. Nicholas was talking about this in terms of when you make the comment, you can't make those products in a sweatshop. This is part of that breaking down of the silos and putting all of the cost in. I mean, it's like 20 years, 30 years, 40 years of our work is all in this conversation all at once. And so you've tapped into it, but part of what it's got to be is your work in terms of bringing that information to a consumer level, and your work over there in terms of what you're doing in making those products, and your work over there as a brand new civil servant who has an opportunity to put in some measure of incentive or preference for the greener product and know about it, and your work over there. And so it's all of those pieces. And we get this bigger vision, and we get on with it.
Thank you. John. Should go
It
on.
will.
Mic 5, please.
Hello, hello, hello. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm an international environment consultant, worked in 40 countries. And the word that rings through from this discussion so far is inclusive. Take a look at the map behind the panel. There are 3 continents there that are not really involved here. And unless we can include the poor, the middle class, and the wealthy people there, we're not going to get anywhere. I'm working in Eastern Europe and mid-Asia now, adapting agriculture to climate change. There's no money there, the knowledge is weak, the political will is not there, and we're in an industrial conference here doing a lot of good work. But when are we going to begin to get some outreach and begin to capture those people and get them enthusiastic too?
Thank you, John. Thank you. Mic number 2, please.
Hi, my name is Karen Struble. I work here in BC doing a climate program with high school students to get them to do greenhouse gas inventories of their high schools. My question, I guess, is aimed towards Nicholas and Tony. You talked about this connection between the spirituality and the environment. And this is something that really interests me. I feel like, climate change is a symptom, like Nicholas mentioned, of a bigger issue. And I feel that bigger issue is this disconnect that society has with the environment. And I'd like to note here that, many First Nations languages don't even have a word for the environment because they acknowledge that we are a part of the environment, we're not separate from it. So if one or both of you could briefly comment on how you think we could start to reconnect, I suppose.
Thank you. Tony first. Take a shot.
You have an extraordinary resource here, the Museum of Anthropology. I think it's just an incredible space and place. And it taught me a lot. And one quote I'll share from you, which I hope to get in at some point, so you've given me the cue. Can one divide human reality, as indeed human reality seems genuinely divided, into clearly different cultures, histories, traditions, societies, even races, and survive the consequence humanly? There's something that we've been around for thousands of years, but we're judging how we respond to this situation and the choices we face through mindsets that we've really only developed in the last 50. Management, the whole kind of system of industrial production is a very, very recent phenomenon. And I'm not saying that doesn't have great strengths and great assets, but to base the future of our species and our planet and other species on everything we've just learnt, and to forget everything we've unlearnt and have put to one side just seems a huge mistake. And I'm sorry I'm in quote mode, but I kind of go, well, I've got the opportunity. The best thing I've read on this is from somebody that Diane and I know, Professor C.S. P. King. My hope is that the 21st century will bring greater equity through the unity of East and West, as well as the 3 unities of ego and eco, of yin and yang, and of soft and hard power, and that action and knowledge will combine so that all of us learn by doing and do by learning. We should all act global and think sustainable. And the thing in that is, if you meet CS, he is Yoda. I mean, Yoda lives, he exists on this planet, and he's given shape and form in this incredible guy. And we think in terms of consumers, we think in terms of citizens, we think in terms of business leaders. We're people. We're people with consciousness. We're people with a consciousness that has great potential, where things should be in the service of achieving that potential, not to fulfill the gnawing gap of our aches and our desires that aren't yet fulfilled. And just, I kind of close on this to sort of weave it back to the consumer point from earlier. If we'd said, and there's a kind of UK context, which is a bit more statist, I suppose, but if we'd said a few years ago, we are going to force, this goes back to the behavioral change thing, which we all get very excited about. We're going to force everybody to give up their CDs and their DVDs, their records, their vinyl, all this kind of hard plastic stuff. Although actually I love vinyl, so it's a bad example, but kind of go with the flow of this argument. You'll have entertainment in some other way. People would have just rejected that because we like what we've got and we like the form in which we take it. And yet most people have now voluntarily and happily dumped that stuff onto digital platforms because it's cooler and because it's better and because it's sexy. And the new relationship that needs to be built up between business, civil society and government is one where, in particular NGOs, I think, embrace and work with business and government rather than being in a kind of zero-sum opposition in this game, which many, David being a huge exception, are still in, so that we're not working in those same boundary conditions anymore, working as people to save a common purpose.
Good. Nick?
Yep, I'll make 3 quick points because I think there's a lot of interesting things out there. I think the first one is, as a white, middle-class, middle-aged male, I need to say, which is people of my descent have run the roost for about 500 years on this planet. And there's a sort of, we're not racists or anything anymore, but there's this implicit assumption that we'll continue to rule the roost and there'll be a few new honorary members of the club. And I think that game's over. And we have to be aware that while we, in our European ancestry, have lots to offer still, there are lots of other cultures that are going to bring something to the table. And I think that the respect for cultural diversity, particularly indigenous peoples, is probably the #1 barometer for me of whether we're on a pathway to sustainability. Second, I think we talk about human genome or the internet or so on as the great breakthroughs. I think the greatest breakthrough right now is in interpersonal neurobiology. Now, what the heck does that mean? It means mind sight, and we're not going to solve the problems with the same way of thinking that created them. Yeah. We are now learning how the mind and the brain works and how we form images and patterns and so on. This is the breakthrough technology, which I think is going to shift us, which brings me to my very last quick point, which is I'm starting to hear language around so-called, we need to move to a steady state economy, that we're on a collision course with the carrying capacity of the planet. I think this is disastrous language. We got to have hyper growth, but it's a different kind of growth. It's a growth in consciousness. It's a growth in happiness. In fact, I was going to jokingly launch Happy Tech here this morning. We'll get a 3-star rating with 3 green happy faces or something on products. But anyway, that aside, we have to have a positive vision. So I'm a capitalist, and I say think globally, act profitably. But it's in a new way of doing it.